Welcome to the Dr. and Mrs. Curry podcast, where the emphasis is on parenting related matters. My name is Dr. Joshua John Curry, and with me is my better half, Mrs. Cartrisa Lynn Curry. Today's episode will concentrate on traumatogenic experiences and environmental surroundings. We're going to jump right in with the subtopic of children, referring to the significant other of their biological parent as their mother or father. Now, again, this is going to be correlating with traumatogenic experiences and environmental surroundings. This particular subtopic that we're starting off this episode with, this is where we ended our last episode as far as children calling the boyfriends of their mother daddy or their father. So what I wanted to do here, I wanted to include, of course, boys and girls, mothers and fathers, and include all genders and matters along those lines. That's why I just wanted to make a little modification as far as the subtopic being now children referring to the significant other of their biological parent as their mother or father. Just to remind us, what we're talking about here is we're not talking about someone who came into the life or lives of a single parent and did a great job as a step parent. That's not what I'm talking about. And that's totally fine. Regardless of what someone wants to do when it comes to their family dynamic or their household situation, this is, of course, all non-judgmental. My wife and I just wanted to create this platform just to manufacture some dialogue and grasp a certain more deeper level of understanding of the differences in all of us as human beings from a sociological perspective. So again, what we're discussing here is we're talking about, in this case, we're going to take a single woman of 4 children. She dates. Nothing wrong with that. Of course, as long as we're not breaking the law and as long as we're not putting our children in a physically or psychologically or emotionally dangerous situation, everything is okay. But what we're discussing here is we're discussing a woman who may have dated 3 to 4 men during the course of one calendar year. But as far as from a conditioning standpoint, her children are conditioned or are groomed to refer to boyfriends or significant others as dad or father. This is something I've seen in my personal life. This is something I've seen in my professional life. I just wanted to create a dialogue here because of along the lines of hopefully when this does happen, the mother or the parent is not trying to intentionally manufacture or manifest any emotional distress or psychiatric or psychological dysregulation. I just wanted to point out that there are some instances in which there could be some sort of manufacturing of trauma or a traumatogenic environmental surrounding. So what was being discussed here, going back to the predominant reason, we're talking about a single, in this case, hypothetically, a single mother of 4 children. She just started dating a gentleman. She's been dating this gentleman for 3 weeks. This gentleman is introduced to her children. This gentleman is in her children's life or lives. Her children are now referring to this gentleman as dad. This relationship runs its course. This woman moves on. There's a brief period in which she isn't dating anyone as far as monogamously. She meets another gentleman. This gentleman seems like he's a good person. She introduces this person into her household dynamic. She introduces this person into the lives of her children. Her children will now refer to this person as dad. What I was doing here was, and at the end of last week's episode, I did reach out to certain professionals, certain counterparts, and I reached out to various people whom I do respect unconditionally. And I made some inquiries about that because I did want to reintroduce this subtopic during this particular episode. There was one person I spoke to. This is someone whom I've met professionally. We've been involved in each other's lives for the past few years. This is someone I've known whom have done this. And what happens here is I asked her just her experiences. She was very transparent with me. She shared with me that as a single mother, and she has children from multiple men, she spoke with me about embracing the realization and being content with her lifestyle. What I mean by that is she spoke with me about that she accepted a very long time ago that the biological fathers of each of her children, they had not been around and she does not foresee anything changing of significance in which they would be around as far as anything of consistency in the lives of their respective children. So what she told me was that she wanted to make sure that the gentleman that she would date subsequently had the understanding that she came as a package deal as far as her and her very lovely, very wonderful, very intelligent children. So what she told me was she took a psychology course, and the way in which she interpreted information was as far as embracing the realization that, and of course, there's no right or wrong answer here. We're just creating a platform to push this discussion along. She told me that to make certain that whomever she is dating, they have an understanding that there is a package deal as far as her and her children. And she expressed with me, she said, how long or how soon is too soon? As far as that particular question, there is no universal answer. Everyone's situation is distinguishing. Everyone's household dynamic is distinctive. Everyone's family dynamic is unique in its own respective manner. So what she told me was that she just made the decision to make certain that she leads off with, here is my name, here's what I have going on. I have X amount of children. I have X amount of fathers of these respective children. Are you willing to move forward? So she told me that she was convinced that with the children referring to whomever she is dating as dad or father or whatever title is applicable, she felt as though, or she feel as though, and she told me that she feels as though to this day, this is what she does. She feels as though there is a heightened sense of the probability of this man remaining around, not only just to date her and to deal with her, but also to be productive, to be consistent, and be actively involved in the lives of each of her children. So what I expressed with her was, what I do with anyone who I encounter professionally, I never tell them what to do. I predominantly offer recommendations and suggestions through the form of a question. So what I'm doing here is I use that and I'll remind the client, whomever I'm working with, I remind them that this is referred to as a client-centered approach. I like to say that this is a collaborative relationship. We're working together. It's not me driving the bus. It's both of us, or it's each of us coming together to figure out how are we going to navigate this particular route. That works for her. I share with her that I will respect and support whatever you're doing. But of course, if we're doing anything that could be detrimental, whether it's physically, emotionally, or psychologically, this is where I would at least like to offer some sort of supplementary interventions or recommendations or suggestions or matters along those lines. I was asking her, how does she feel about potential psychological detriment that she could be unintentionally, of course, she does love her children unconditionally. Facilitated family counseling sessions with multiple members of her family. I've seen that unconditional love for myself firsthand, so that's definitely not a question. I was curious about her perspectives as far as potential psychological trauma that could be manifesting itself through calling multiple men during the course of just one calendar year dad. She does have boys and girls. She has multiple children. She does have boys and girls. What I was getting at here was I wanted to start, first of all, with her daughters. I said, eventually, of course, your daughters will start dating. Eventually, of course, your daughters will go through that natural course of life in which there is a monogamous relationship, which we move forward through an engagement, through a marriage, through having children. I was asking her, unfortunately, because of what's taking place with their biological fathers not being in the picture, I was asking her, from your children's perspective, are we painting the most healthy, productive illustration of what a father should look like, as far as with you dating a gentleman for 2.5 months, 4 months, or whatever, we call this gentleman dad or father. This gentleman disappears. Someone else subsequently takes his place during the course of the next several weeks or couple of months or whatever's appropriate, whatever's applicable. So are your daughters potentially seeing, okay, this is a representation of a father? Because what we want to do is, if we're able to do so, we want to do the best that we can to not perpetuate some sort of generational stereotype, generational circumstance, generational occurrence. We want to make sure that we're at least doing what we can. We can't control what's going to happen subsequently in the future along those lines, but we can at least set the positive, set the most appropriate example of what things should look like. Or perhaps we don't have to settle for this. We don't have to settle for that. We don't have to settle for not just particularly single motherhood, but we don't have to settle for doing everything on our own, doing everything by ourselves, not having that healthy representation of what a father figure should at least look like. We don't have to stay together romantically to be active parents and things along those lines. I just wanted to make certain with her that she was actually dedicating a sufficient amount of time focused on, okay, am I painting the most productive, healthy illustration of what a father or a father figure should look like as far as in the eyes of my children because of what they've experienced? This is where I transition over into our sons. And I said, eventually, your sons, just like your daughters, they will go through of that natural course of life in which they become involved in a monogamous relationship. We progress to engagement, progress to marriage, or whatever's going to happen as far as them. But eventually, of course, whatever they decide to do in life, let's just say hypothetically, they father some children. Do we want them to have that appropriate picture of being involved? If things work out romantically with the mothers of their children when the time comes and they live long lives together, long, healthy, happy lives together and grow old together, that would be great. But of course, that's not always the case. If that's not the case, or whatever's going to happen, do they have a sufficient depiction of what the father should be? Have that father involved, have the father have one-on-one time with each of his children, have the father get each of his children together to have those experiences as far as siblings doing things as a collective unit, as far as family? Or are we painting a picture that a father is someone who just shows up every once in a while? A father is someone who dates multiple women over the course of X amount of time, get women pregnant, have children, move on, and just come around a few times, a few times a week, a few times a month, a few times a year. In some cases, unfortunately, which I've seen personally and professionally, a few times a decade, or perhaps even never. Are we painting that particular picture that could perpetuate psychological dysregulation, emotional distress that could present or manifest itself as a traumatogenic environment? What I wanted to toss to my better half: what could we do to continue this particular dialogue? What could we do to at least get people in a position to understand? I mean, of course, whatever happens in our respective household or family dynamic, that's totally okay. But to at least get us to sit back and think about, okay, am I painting the most accurate or the most sufficient, most importantly, the most healthy depiction of what the significant of what a father or a mother or a parent in that sense should look like? What could we do to push that dialogue forward so we're not having children call whomever's their biological parents are dating? And again, we're not talking about step parents, just someone that they're dating in the interim or dating temporarily. What could we do to at least not slow it down? Because of course we don't want to be judgmental. Everyone's situation is different. What can we do to get people to at least sit back and think, is this the most healthy thing for my child or my children?
As far as this situation goes, like you said, every family is different, but I would personally recommend not, like if you've been dating someone for a small amount of time, there are other ways to let them know that you come as a package deal. You can do activities together with your kids, them and your kids, barbecues, activities at the arcade and stuff like that. By having your children call someone else, multiple someone else within a small amount of time, dad or father, you're unintentionally conditioning them to believe that that's what that role is. That role comes in and leaves and is not a consistent person. So I would recommend hanging out together. Let your kids just hang out with a person. Let them call them Mr. Roger or Mr. Bob, whatever their name is. They can call them that and still show that form of respect to an elder. And you can do, like I said, you can invite him over for dinners, for lunches, for going to the picnic, going to the park, going to arcades and stuff, so that they get that understanding that you do come as a package deal, and that every time you guys go out is not going to be just you and your significant other, that your new relationship that you're hoping will progress farther. um, I think it's important to also sit down and talk to your kids and ask them how they feel about it. Ask them, hey, does this bother you doing this all the time? Or would you prefer not to do this? Would you prefer just to call them Mr. Whatever? So ask them for their input on the situation as well, since you guys are a family and it's something you guys should discuss together.
That point you made about asking our children, I've mentioned during other episodes of this podcast. I've been talking with. We have a 14-year-old daughter at the time of this recording. I've been talking to her about life and about the world since she was 2 years old. If my memory serves me correctly, I've been doing the same thing with our son, who is currently 4 years old at the time of this presentation. The reason why I wanted to highlight what you had just mentioned, I was involved with a Child Protective Services case advocating from a clinical perspective for a client. And there was a judge, there was a 6-year-old child whom was the target child. The judge had mentioned that she wanted to hear from the child. There were some issues as far as getting the child to the proceeding. The child did end up not only arriving into the courtroom, but taking the stand. And the judge said something very powerful. She mentioned that children have their own experiences, perspectives, viewpoints, and emotions. And we as the adults in their lives, we must take that into accountability if they are at least if it is age appropriate, and if they are at least they have the intellectual ability to articulate what's taking place. And of course, it's up to the adults to veto or approve whatever's going to happen moving forward. But that was very powerful, and I've actually took that. I've incorporated that not only into my professional life, but I incorporated that into my personal life as a father of our 2 children. That was very important, very powerful. So I'm always one to ask our children, okay, how do you feel about this? And of course, as their father, it is ultimately up to myself as their father to say, okay, we're going to move in this direction, or we're going to move in that direction. But I at least want to know how they feel about a particular experience, just like unrelated to this with our 14-year-old daughter. During the time of this recording, the upcoming weekend, she, of course, rightfully so, earned a spot in an All-Star game. But there were already plans as far as her going away for a brief mini vacation to visit loved ones, to spend some time with one of her best friends. So I asked her, "What do you want to do? Do you want to play in the All-Star game, or do you want to spend time to get away from the area, see some loved ones, see your friend?" She shared with me that she wanted to. I was good either way. I told her, whatever you want to do, I will be wholeheartedly supportive because each of them are going to be wonderful experiences that you will remember for life either way. So whatever you want to do, it's totally fine. So since they're both safe, they're both appropriate. There isn't going to be any traumatization that she will experience, or well, of course, hopefully not, God willing. But they're both going to be wonderful experiences. But unfortunately, because of scheduling, she will not be able to engage in both as far as the All-Star game or going away for the brief mini vacation. She elected, of course, without hesitation, the mini vacation. I just wanted to bring this back to a point of it being very important for us to ask our children how do they feel about what's taking place in their life, if they are at least old enough to articulate themselves. But of course, it's up to us as parents to ultimately approve or veto what will or will not transpire during the course of their life, or at least while they're children. And we're just going to be there to support and advocate for them as their parents. I did ask another woman. I wanted to present this. I asked another woman about why does this take place, and I shared with her that I'm using this for. I told her about the this being a subtopic for our respective podcasts, and I just asked her if she mind if I would at least share, of course, without divulging her personal information. I just asked her would she mind if I shared her what she told me, and she said she would be honored to, and hopefully this could be something that could help someone someday. And I just reminded her that's of course the predominant purpose. I asked her why does she allow her children to call, or why does she encourage her children to refer to men that she's dating as far as dad or father or whatever. And she shared with me that she just wasn't certain about what to call them. I did offer the recommendation that you had provided. Why not refer to them as Mr. Dave or Mr. David as his first name, or Mr. Johnstone as his last name? And she said that she felt as though that was just too that wasn't interpersonal. She felt as though that was just more so something like a professional environment. She wanted to make sure this was a relaxed, family friendly, family oriented environment. So she felt as though referring to whomever she's dating as dad was more welcoming, more softer. I told her I did respect that particular approach. I was just curious about that. The reason why I knew about this wasn't something that correlated with anything that she and I were discussing as far as professionally. I just happened to overhear. I knew that she was dating a gentleman. The gentleman came inside prior to our time together. The gentleman came inside to drop something off to her that she was going to need during the course of our time together. So I knew that she would just started dating this person. A couple of weeks later, I heard one of her children call this person dad. So that's why I knew that this was a situation in which she just started dating this person and was moving forward with either encouraging or allowing her children to refer to this gentleman as dad. Now, from your standpoint, as far as her mentioning that it was a little bit uncomfortable as far as referring to someone she's dating as Mr. either first name or Mr. last name, what other options could we offer someone if they feel as though that it's a little bit too formal, so to speak, to refer to them in that particular way? What else could we offer them?
There's one thing that every family is different, but I know a lot of families, especially African American Black families, they have a lot of friends that are so close to their family that they actually consider them family, so they call them like uncle or aunt. So if that you could try that situation if you feel like Mr. So and so is a little too formal, or you could just have them call them by their name or a nickname. You can give them a nick. They can come up with a nickname together, and they can call them by the nickname. So like uncle or aunt, which a lot of families do that. They have friends that have been like my family, for instance. My grandmother has a friend that she's had for longer than I've been alive or even a thought, and we call her Nanny. So, and then there's also, and so, like I said, like you could come up with a nickname for them, or you can call them like uncle or aunt, like that too. It takes away the possible pressure of the word dad for someone that's not a dad yet, but it also gives that comfort of still being part of the family.
On two notes there, I was raised by my stepfather. Again, another shout out to Mr. Jonathan Wayne Cisco Sr. He was the greatest. He did a very excellent job as being that stepfather, and like I mentioned during our previous episode that correlated with this particular subtopic, he did a great job at stepping in. A lot of principles and applications as far as parenting, as far as being a father, I adopted from what he did. I've replicated what he did even to this day. I replicated what he did, and he did a great job. He met my mom at a very young age. They were both in their early 20s at the time. My mother had two children, and he stepped in and he treated my brother and I like we were his own children. Very warm, very kind, very passionate. I referred to him as John throughout my childhood. So that was always most natural as far as us. That's how I was introduced to him, and that's what I referred to him throughout my life. But I did look at him, of course, as my father figure, with unfortunately matters taking place with my biological father not being able to be around as often as perhaps we would have liked to. But John did a great job at stepping in. John never said anything negative about my father. He always said nothing. I don't believe they've had too many encounters, if any encounters for that matter. Perhaps there was some brief when I was very young, but he was always very, very kind, very passionate, very warm, making certain, very supportive of making certain that I did spend time with my biological father when those opportunities presented themselves. On the opposite end, like you mentioned, as far as that recommendation is referring to someone as auntie or uncle, such and such, there were a lot of aunties and uncles in my family who I found out later that we were not biological relatives. I actually did see someone refer to a gentleman that a female loved one of mine was dating. We all did refer to this person as uncle such and such, and that was a great way of course, persisting or expanding or extending that family dynamic without making matters as far as seeming formal, rather than referring to him as Mr. Such and Such. And it also took away that pressure of being called dad or matters along those lines. So we all just referred to him as Uncle such and such, and just came to the realization that he was actually not anyone's uncle. Perhaps that title changed once they had got married and moved forward. But at least during that particular time, we were told this is Uncle such and such. That's what he was called. That's how we viewed him. And things did move on, and they were at least able to have a move forward and have a very healthy and productive marriage, relationship, and marriage, which at least up to the point of this recording of this presentation is still moving forward all these years and all these decades later. This is where I wanted to transition into, of course, remaining along the lines of traumatogenic traumatogenic environmental considerations. I wanted to transition into children witnessing their parents go through intimate partner violence. I am a board certified specialist in anger management. And I do have that particular, that's one of the professional credentials that I do. I love them all. I looked at those as substantiation of at least making an effort to be engaged in deliberate practice to be the best version of a clinical practitioner that I can be. The reason why I pointed out that particular professional credential, I do work with a lot of people who present with what's referred to as an intermittent explosive disorder diagnosis. They have challenges as far as anger management. That's pretty much the reason why I wanted to highlight that particular professional credential. I work with a lot of families, a lot of couples, in which there is unfortunately perpetuated involvement with intimate partner violence. I share with people as far as self disclosure, particularly when I meet someone for the first time. For the vast majority of the times, I'm predominantly working with a female client. There's a male, there's a male significant other, and there's intimate partner violence going on. So whenever we're working with, I use the psychological approach. Whenever we're working with, we're trying to introduce a male into our dynamic as far as working on these issues as far as anger management. I'll use self-disclosure. And I'll say, of course, no one's perfect. And I'll say that one of my very first memories in life goes back to being 2 years old. And I was watching my biological mother and my biological father engaged in intimate partner violence. So the reason why I share that is, of course, not to just check off the box, take up time. What I'm doing there is to show that none of us are perfect, that none of us are that we're all susceptible to having a bad day. What I'll talk to both parties about, I'll say I want to at least, of course, outside of any emotional or psychological challenges, none of us wake up in the morning. And again, outside of any neurocognitive difficulties or implications, we're not waking up in the morning saying, you know what, I want to physically attack someone who I just told I love you at some point during this week or sometime recently. A chain of events take place. But what I like to do here, and I'll tell the couple, regardless of how productive our family counseling session or a couples counseling session, whatever the title is during that particular time, regardless of how productive today will be for us, our challenges, and I always say we because I'm in this with you now. Our challenges are not going to go away wholeheartedly today. What I want to do here is I want to establish a foundation and I want to build upon that particular structure. So what I'm doing here is particularly when we have children involved, I'm talking about let's remain mindful of how the children could be impacted emotionally, psychologically, and matters along those lines, not just today, but moving forward. Are we creating an environment in which a child is coming to the realization or at least believing that we handle our anger, we handle emotionality, we handle bad situations, we handle disagreements, disputes, arguments with physical aggression. We get in physical altercations. This is how we handle things in this particular household. And this is, amongst other things, this is how it becomes conditioned. This becomes perpetuated from a cross generational perspective. I at least want to remind people of how children witnessing intimate partner violence could cause them to go to school and have those behavioral outbursts. This is something that I addressed with a client recently. Unfortunately, we had to reschedule an individual counseling session. There was an incident. She did call me from her child's school. Her child was involved in a very horrific illustration of physical aggressiveness towards not only one student, but other students. She shared with me some of the details about there being a disagreement that took place and he had unfortunately used a weapon. What I mean by weapon, I'm talking about a chair that was in a classroom. He used the chair and started to attack other students. So, what could have gotten him so angry? What's taking place in an elementary school classroom that could cause someone to become so angry or become so concerned that they feel as though that they're now exercising that biological consideration as far as fight or flight? So, this particular child decided that I'm threatened or I'm afraid. Of course, I don't have all the details there. We haven't had time to sit down and process that yet together outside of a brief telephonic interaction. But what caused this child to grab a chair and start attacking people? So what I've asked her, because I know that she's unfortunately dealt with intimate partner violence across many years, multiple decades, with various men that she was dating. So what I did, I asked her about, have your child ever seen weapons used in the household? I'm not talking about guns or knives. I'm just talking about, have books been used? Have potential baseball bats been used? Have something that's light enough for someone to pick up and use as a weapon? Has anything in the household been weaponized during an argument, during a debate? She said, yes, this happens all of the time. So what I shared with her is, we talked about nature and nurture. We're talking about things that could be, this could be coming into fruition concurrently, as far as with an intermittent explosive disorder diagnosis. Just like we inherit our body type, our hair texture, our skin complexion, our eye color, we could inherit genetically. We could inherit behavioral characteristics. We could inherit mental health related disorder features of a respective mental health disorder, including intermittent explosive disorder. So what happens here was, and also in addition to that, this child has seen all of these matters unfold within his household. So we were just talking about how he could have been traumatized to the point through conditioning that he's seen this. So what I wanted to offer, what I wanted to toss to you, as far as offering our audience, we have someone who's been exposed to intimate partner violence across multiple relationships throughout the years, spanning multiple decades. She's become content. And what I'm doing here is I'm paraphrasing what multiple women have told me. They feel as though that this is something that's synonymous with our relationships. What I've told, I tell a story, and I don't have no idea why, but I love to tell this particular story. It's from 20 years ago. I'll tell I'll tell these couples that I've never been involved with intimate partner violence, but I'll say that there's a there was a time in which I was involved in a crime victimization. There was an attempt, as far as three different people, they were trying to rob me. Fortunately for myself, one, growing up in Philadelphia, you're in a position to know how to defend yourself. I was also involved with boxing, judo, karate, various forms of combat sports and self defense. So I'm very comfortable defending myself. But what took place here was, there were two gentlemen. They were trying to attack me. I was able to fend myself off. A third assailant had jumped on my back. At the time, I was backing out of this particular store. It was a closing area. I was just backing out. I was trying to get away from the area because of my victimization. Someone jumped on me. I quickly found out it was a small woman. I did flip her over. Unfortunately, her collarbone was broken. I was a law enforcement was called to the scene there. I just asked them to watch the camera. I said, "Hey, I don't." She told them that we were dating. I told law enforcement that if you watch the cameras, you just get the footage from the videos from the restaurant. You can see that I stepped in, ordered some food, stepped off to the side. They came in, drew weapons, went to rob me. They got close enough for me to grab them. I grabbed one, neutralized him. I was able to grab his associate, neutralized him. Decided to back out of the store. The young lady was waiting outside. She jumped on me. I flipped her over. I assumed she was bigger and heavier than what she was. Also assumed that she was a male. I flipped her over. She was a lot lighter, a lot smaller. Her collarbone was broken. I shared that story to show that even though I've never had any intentions of hurting anyone, particularly a woman, that incident took place. I did not have time to slow down and process anything, but still, the theoretical records will show that I did break a female's collarbone. I wasn't proud of that, but I feel as though telling that story at least humanizes myself. It humanizes the situations that when I woke up that morning, I had no idea I was going to be in a fight with three different people. I had no idea I was going to have two guns drawn on me at a Chinese restaurant, getting some very delicious food, by the way. The chain of events happens throughout the day. So what we can do moving forward is why I share that is okay, what can I do to make certain that that situation doesn't happen again? And that's when I bring things back to intimate partner violence, particularly when we have children involved in the dynamic. This happened yesterday. This happened last week. Okay. I like to identify what took place. Let's recognize those anger cues. Do I find my heart racing? Do I find myself short of breath? Do I find myself perspiring? Do I find myself pacing around the room? Do I find myself becoming dizzy? Let's recognize those anger cues. Let's get ourselves away from that environment as quickly as possible if we're able to do so. This is where I also ask the significant other when he or she is trying to get themselves back grounded, when he or she is trying to get away from what's going on, do you allow them to do so? And surprisingly, oftentimes I'm actually told no. I'm told that I will follow that person outside. I will jump on the hood of that vehicle. I will jump inside of that vehicle and I will continue this. So what we're doing here is now we could be potentially inducing or we could be feeding that monster, so to speak, that's trying to get itself resolved. Now we're feeding it. We're putting ourselves in this environment, but ultimately our children are experiencing intimate partner violence, regardless of what happens as far as the attempts that were tried to either escape, it's still materialized, and then it's perpetuated in another 3 weeks, in another month, in another 3 months. It persists throughout the course of a calendar year as a relationship progresses. It becomes affiliated with that particular relationship, with that household dynamic. It becomes embedded into the psyche of the child or children. So again, what I wanted to toss back at you, I know I meant to toss this at you a few minutes ago, but I went off on a little soliloquy there. But I wanted to toss at you, what could we offer parents, or what could we offer couples in which there are at least children in the household or the family dynamic? What could we offer them to have them at least take a step back, slow down, breathe, and at least process or at least intellectualize? If I persist with this, or if this becomes embedded into the psyche of our relationship or our household, how could this impact the child or children? What can we do to offer people to at least take a step back and analyze the child or children from a traumatogenic perspective?
The truth of the matter is that if you and your partner are physically abusive to each other, and your child witnesses it in any form by hearing it from another room or seeing it visually, they have a very much higher probability of one having it in their relationship. So if you have a daughter, she's going to expect it to be normal. So when she starts dating and progresses into marriage or whatever she chooses, her partner, if that occurs, she's going to consider it to be a normal relationship. So she's going to be accepting of it when she should not be. Two, your son is going to think that if you have a son, he'll think that again, it's normal, and that he'll progress and use that in his form of communication within his relationships. It's important for us as parents to realize that we set the example for our kids as far as to what they should and should not accept in their lives and in their relationships as they get older and grow. I think as a point, us as parents, if you and your partner know that you guys can become very loud as far as argumentative, or you guys could at times get physical with each other, if you guys are having a conversation that you feel maybe get heated, I would recommend you guys having it in separate parts of the room. So like if you have a sectional love seat or something, you sit on one side and they sit on the other far side, and keep all objects away from you, and you guys stay in your seat. Do not stand up for anything whatsoever, so that it has to be a conversation. It doesn't progress beyond that. And then the other important thing is that if someone needs a minute to step away so that they can recollect themselves, so that it doesn't progress farther than a possible yelling argument, let that person go, because you actually need that minute as well, because you're getting to that point to where you're going to be progressing beyond just the possible yelling in an argument. So it's important to take time to sit back, take a deep breath. And if you guys feel like your voices are raising, both of you stop, count to 5, and try again. So always keep in your mind when you have children that you set the tone for them as far as what is and isn't acceptable as they get older and start dating.
I feel as though those perspectives are very instrumental, very intellectually sound, and hopefully what you had just shared was is something that could help someone at least take that step back and process what's going on. Like you made mention of that expectation moving forward once children become of dating age and have their own relationships. I've had an array of people I've worked with throughout the years who were involved and who have been involved with relationships in which intimate partner violence and of course them being parents. Intimate partner violence was unfortunately embedded into their relationship. And I would ask about, of course, working with me through treatment planning to hopefully identify any emotional, socioeconomical, psychological challenges that could be perhaps feeding this particular monster. But I'll be told, no, this is something that's just a part of relationships. I'll be told that, and I can look the person in their eyes and I can tell that they mean that. I've been told by people that we don't need to address this during our time together. They'll say, I do know that you are a certified specialist in anger management, but I have more pressing matters in life to discuss. And that's what I'll dive into. Okay, yes, we do have some pressing things to discuss as far as treatment planning, but I would at least like to ask that person when it comes to intimate partner violence. Now, this is where I'll dive into the children. I'll say, okay, you're dating a man who lifts weights daily. He's very much into physical fitness. He has an amateur boxing background. He's 223 pounds at 6 feet 2. He's very stout. He's very strong. You have an 8-year-old son and you have a 6-year-old son. I would ask the woman, I like to provide along these lines, I like to provide these perhaps uncomfortable but hypothetical scenarios that could play out. I'll say I remember when I was 8 years old, I didn't think that there was not only a boy my age, I didn't think there was a man alive who could beat me up. I was convinced at 8 years old that I was just too fast, too strong, too smart. I believed I could physically defend myself against an adult male. Of course, as an adult male looking back, it's pretty far fetched. But I truly believe that because of what I was able to do against my peers in karate class, during boxing matches, during my judo lessons and things like that, I believe that I had the skills to defend myself against anyone. I truly believe that the only people who could perhaps this is me at 8 years old as an 8-year-old boy, I believe that the only people who could perhaps give me a challenge would be more experienced people as far as boxing, judo, karate, and other combat sports. But I also believe that they only had more credentials because they were doing it longer. I still believe that I was just as good, if not better than them. I just believe that if they were able to get the best of me, is because they caught me on a bad day. So I'll share that. I'll bring it back to the woman and her sons. And I'll say, what if your sons believed like how I believed? What if during the commencement of there being some form of intimate partner violence between you and your significant other? And here's a man who's 6'2", 220 pounds, amateur boxer, very low body fat, very high body mass index. Pretty much, I'm painting a picture of your significant other is pretty strong, and an 8-year-old boy and a 6-year-old boy is probably not going to do much of anything to try to defend you. But as their mother, they may perhaps try to defend you. During this defense, if we're talking about alcohol or some other form of mind altering chemical being introduced into the dynamic, this person may not wholeheartedly be aware of the damage that he could do not only to yourself, but to your children if they try to intervene. I've been involved with situations in which I've gone to not just family court, but criminal court as far as child endangerment, child abuse, neglect, and matters along those lines of children being placed in what was perceived to be dangerous situations because they got injured to the point of bones being broken, to the point of hospitalization being needed over the course of an extended period of time because of them attempting to break up or attempting to protect a loved one during the course of intimate partner violence. So all of this correlates with traumatogenic environmental considerations. And this is something that I feel as though that that we should persist with moving forward during future and subsequent episodes and things along those lines. Remaining along the course of trauma, I actually wanted to transition to something a little bit softer, but still something that could be traumatizing in a sense. What I wanted to present to us now is siblings raising siblings. Now here's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about an older, responsible, in this case, we'll just say a 16-year-old girl. I'm not talking about her babysitting her 7-year-old siblings. I'm not talking about her preparing meals, perhaps ironing clothes, perhaps doing chores, maybe helping out with homework periodically and things along those lines. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the parentization process in which a sibling assumes the role of a mother, the role of a father. I'm talking about a child assuming that role, a child pretty much running a household. Throughout my career, I have witnessed this on many occasions. I always tell people that I present matters again from a non judgmental perspective. I just want to further understand. Again, this is referred to as deliberate practice. Whenever I see that 12-year-old girl literally running a household, I'll ask the parent. I'll say, "What's going on here? Why does she have so many responsibilities?" What I do here, I don't say she should not have that many responsibilities. I'll ask, "Why does she have so many responsibilities? Why does she have to iron the clothing for 6 other children? Why does she have to prepare breakfast, lunch, and dinner for herself, for all of her siblings? Why does she have to help everyone out with their homework? Why is she accountable for the changing of all the diapers and things along those lines?" Pretty much to paraphrase and to make the responses collective, I'll be told that this young lady is very responsible. She's very mature, which is great. But this is where I'll dive into, okay, could we be triggering or inducing some sort of traumatization as far as this particular 12-year-old not being able to be 12 years old because this person has gone through that parentization process in which she now sees herself as an equal to you because she's doing just as much, if not more, as far as the household dynamic, as far as running the household as you. And when I'll bring this up, this will be along the lines where there's some sort of emotional or psychological issues as far as the child speaking to the parent in a certain way. And that's when I return back to after I take my notes, I have my notes stored. And I return back to remember we discussed this X amount of weeks ago. We discussed that your child has so many responsibilities within the household. They may perhaps see themselves as your peer, even though they're not your peer, but because of what they have to do on a daily basis, they're essentially raising their siblings. And that's when things will go back into single parenthood. We all need help. And I say, yes, I do empathize as far as that. I do understand. But along those lines, what are we doing to our children from a traumatogenic standpoint as far as them assuming roles in which they're not just helping out? You're not going out on a date asking your oldest child to babysit their siblings for the course of a couple hours. They're raising their children. They're responsible for their siblings over the course of days at a time consecutively. So I wanted to bring to your attention what could we do to help people out that may not do this intentionally, but essentially there's a household dynamic in which there are siblings raising siblings. The oldest child is not just babysitting or helping out. The oldest child is literally raising their siblings. What can we do to help people out as far as bringing awareness to that to show how that could actually cause emotional or psychological dysregulation?
I think one of the easiest ways to determine if that is happening in your household is if on a consistent basis you call one of your children's name more than another one. If you constantly calling one child's name to take care of or go help another child, that child is ultimately doing more than they should be doing as a sibling. You know, one of the best ways to stop doing that as a parent is if even if you're in the middle of doing something, take a second and go see what's going on. Go see if someone's yelling mom or whatever, go see what that child needs instead of sending one of your other children to do it. It's important that you let your kids be kids, even if they are more mature at their age than a typical child their age. It's still important for them to be able to be a child because they're going to have that time once they turn 18, 19, that they're going to be an adult. The time that they have up until that point is the only time that they have to be a child, to experience the freedom of being a child, of having no major responsibilities. And as a parent, yes, you want your child to have some responsibilities, for your children to have responsibilities, so that way they know as they get older how to take care of themselves and how to progress through life. But they should never have the responsibility of another human being, unless under different circumstances something else happens. But they should never have the responsibility of another human being for more than a couple hours at a time while they're babysitting or something along those lines. Asking them to help make a meal once in a while, that's fine, that's understandable. They should not be cooking dinner every night. Us as parents, that's our responsibility. I understand sometimes we get overwhelmed and we have a hard day at work, or we have a hard day and we just need a break. That's understandable. We're all humans. We all have those experiences. But it's important for us to also remember that our children have hard days and they need a break as well. So let's not push our responsibilities off onto them, even if it's going to be in that moment, it seems like it's easier. And it also seems like you're not doing it. But if it's something that you're sitting there, you're thinking back, I didn't do that at my age, then they should not be doing it at their age.
Also along those lines, if someone is saying to themselves they were doing that during their age, I would like for us to, if you are that person, if you were the one, like you mentioned, cooking all the meals, or cooking meals every night, cooking meals 3 times a day, or at least preparing breakfasts for the siblings as far as getting them ready for school during the school year. If you were the one ironing clothing for everyone, you were the one doing all the laundry, taking on parental responsibilities, you did it, you survived, you're, for the most part, you're okay emotionally or psychologically. If you say to yourself, okay, I did it, that was my life, I'm okay, that's totally great. Of course, kudos to you. But to piggyback on what you said and to add on to that, I would like for you, as far as if you were that person, let's take that step back and think, okay, I did that. That was my life. Did I enjoy that? Would I prefer to have done something else? And of course, I always tell people, be wholeheartedly honest with yourself. So those were your circumstances. You were to say, okay, I did it. I survived. I'm fine. Would you have rather been doing that? Would you have rather have been busy playing video games, or playing with something, or doing something that you wanted to do for yourself, just being that 12-year-old, being that little kid? Would you rather have done that? Or were you, if you're honest with yourself, were you wholeheartedly okay with taking on those responsibilities? There are personality types in which, there are behavioral characteristics in which someone at an early age could be that responsible. They could want, they could welcome those sort of things. But perhaps for the most part, let's be wholeheartedly honest with ourselves. Was that what I wanted? And should I perpetuate that? If that was my experience, should I perpetuate that as far as my children? And this is where I wanted to transition into repeating grades as our next subtopic. At the time of this presentation, the school year around the country, around the United States of America, for the vast majority of grade school students, K through 12, is coming to an end. A lot of my individual counseling sessions are focused on, I do have a lot of parents I work with who allow me to work with them and work with their children. I do have a lot of parents who made the decision to have their children repeat a grade. There are actually surprisingly multiple parents, their children are repeating the same grade multiple times. And what's very concerning about that is this: one, the child had the entire school year to to get themselves prepared. So I'll ask, okay, what's going on? Why are we repeating your grade? Because at least in the state in which we live and work in Pennsylvania, we do have the No Child Left Behind Act. So for the most part, yes, no. Should we just show up, or should we just just be on the roster and move on to next grade? Yeah, of course not. There should be some sort of academic slash intellectual development and progression and advancement to show that we are prepared for the upcoming, for our next grade. There are a lot of parents that I've been working with, and this is very alarming. They're sharing with me that they're having their child repeat a grade for the first time, for the second time, and there's one person I'm working with, their child is repeating this grade for the third time. Here's what's very concerning about that. I asked her, I said, your child is on the verge of at least perhaps starting puberty soon. They are literally going to be 3 years older than their, I guess we can use the term contemporaries. Well, they're classmates. They're not really contemporaries. They're at different points mentally, physically, intellectually. And here's what I was concerned about. I had shared with her about a student when I was in the fourth grade. This particular student, he was 2 years older than everyone else. And this was something that was known during the first day. The teacher, I don't have many memories about how we learned this information, but there was something different about him. I'm not meaning different in a way that to tease. It was just something different. And come to find out he was older than us. Looking back as a child, I noticed that we would stay away from him, not because we didn't want to affiliate with him. There was a bit of a fear factor there. He was older, and there was a little bit of aggression towards the rest of us, particularly the males, particularly the boys. Come to find out, as looking back on things, he had a lot of things going on within his household dynamic. There was a lot of issues going on there, and the physical aggressiveness towards others. It was a lot of us, we just wanted to stay away. I could speak for myself. I didn't want to get involved in the physical altercation with an older boy. I was actually targeted by this older boy for a physical altercation. He just walked into the class one day and said that we were going to fight after school. I literally never spoke to him the entire school year. I had no idea where that came from. This is a story I share with you very often. That triggered memory just comes up very frequently throughout my life. I share with you just looking back. I've always been fascinated by why, what did the adults do or not do in his life? Why was that his life? He did end up the shortly after he and I had the physical altercation, he didn't come back to school. And keep in mind, I was in the fourth grade. He was in the fourth grade. He was supposed to be in the sixth grade. He did actually, he was starting to develop facial hair. I remember being very afraid for my physical well being, but also, I guess we could say, luckily for me, I was involved with combat sports at a very young age, so I was able to defend myself. I remember whispering to him, like this was yesterday. I remember whispering to him, just stay down. I really don't want to hurt you. He just kept persisting. He eventually had enough, never returned to school. I share that story with people whenever they talk about their children repeating grades. I'll ask why. Are there mentors? Are there teachers at school? Are there tutors? And they'll say yes. But my child does not like to be involved in those programs. And that's when I'll dive back into, of course, I'm saying in a supportive way, but I say I didn't know that our children, yes, we want to respect our children's opinions, their perspectives, their experiences, but I didn't know that our children have a choice in that matter. If you're struggling academically, we're going to get some tutoring. It's our obligation, and we should want to do so as parents to make sure that our children are in a position to be successful. And I'll use scenarios in which our children could do something that could impact humanity from a historical perspective. But the parents, for the most part, I've been told that if this is what the child wants to do, they would say, my child wants to repeat a grade. And I'll say, okay, but let's look at how things could play out from a sociological perspective. Let's look at self-esteem. I've always been I'm a humble person. I've always been a very confident person, and one that came from within. But two things that I can pinpoint where that confidence came from. Number one, it was academic accomplishment, and of course, athletic. As far as academically, making honor roll every report period, making the National Honor Society. That was an expectation I set for myself. Getting the highest score in examination. And the schools I went to, they will call out your name and tell you the score. Whenever someone scored a point or two higher than me, it was very upsetting with me. If I scored a 99, she scored a 100. Well, I did not score a 100. So my goal for every other subject moving forward, I'm going to score a 100. Of course, it's very challenging to remain perfect in an academic environment, but that was my goal I set for myself. I'm always very proud to say that I accomplished the highest degree, a doctorate degree, with a perfect grade point average of 4.0. That really means a lot to me. And I know that that will not impact the life of anyone else. That was a goal I set for myself before applying to postgraduate school. I said I want to be in this particular program and I want to have a perfect grade point average. just for myself. That was the expectation I set for myself. And I'll share that with parents when they're talking about having their children repeat grades. I say, of course, things could change moving forward, but will we at least lower our likelihood of our children having that level of expectation for themselves? They say, I had to repeat this grade in grade school once, that grade twice. What could we be doing to our children? And I know time is coming to an end for us as far as the recording of this episode. What I wanted to toss at you was we're talking about if parents are not taking advantage of tutoring, if parents are not taking their children to school early or late, or they have night programming, depending on where you're at geographically, if they have weekend programming, summer schools, at least the Philadelphia school system, where in which I grew up during my time as far as grade school, all those opportunities were available for us. I took advantage of all those opportunities. I took morning classes, I took evening classes, I took weekend classes, I took summer classes. I always wanted to make sure that I was staying abreast and I was keeping my mind sharp for the upcoming school year. So I can at least say that regardless of what's happening in life, I will be successful academically. So with parents not taking advantage of those opportunities, and I've been told they do exist because I'll ask those questions. So that's when I feel like all I have left is sociological considerations. So we're not worried about our child. Of course, there will be, the oldest child in the class. Someone's got to be the oldest. Someone will be the youngest. But now we're in control of our child being 2, perhaps even 3 years older than everyone else. But we're not worried about how other children could react to our child if that is us. What could that do to our child emotionally? Could that trigger some sort of traumatogenic considerations? What could we offer parents to at least look into focusing more so not just on academics, because we do have tutors and we have great teachers that are working throughout the United States of America. What can we do to at least bring more attentiveness as far as the sociological aspect of having your child repeat a grade once, twice, perhaps even 3 times, and being 2 to 3 years older than everyone else in the class?
We as parents, it's our responsibility to make sure our kids are doing everything they're supposed to be doing. It's our job to make sure they do their homework before they turn on their video game. It's our job to make sure they turn in their homework. Schools now they do progress reports and then they do report cards. So when you see your child's progress report and you see their report card and you see that they're not doing as well as they should be, and you see that they're missing assignments and that they're missing school days and things like this, it's your job to pull them aside and say, hey, why didn't you turn this in? And why aren't you in class like you're supposed to be? I've told you this before. When I was in high school, there was one of my classmates, the school district I was in, they had started a program where if you were truant to school, you didn't show up to school, your parents could actually pay a fine or go to jail. So his mom dropped him off at school every day, and she ended up getting this letter in the mail from one of our vice principals or principal, whatever it was. She said, telling her that, hey, you're close to truancy court. And she was like, what? So she followed him around, my classmate, she followed him around in school every day for a week. And then she would periodically pop into school to see if he was in class like he was supposed to be, because she was not necessarily concerned about the truancy court part. She was more concerned about the why aren't you where I put you? And why aren't you in class like you're supposed to be? There are things like taking them to tutoring, taking them and making sure they're doing the tutoring and progressing like they're supposed to be. A lot of people think that you just drop your kid off at school and it ends there. It's all up to the teacher. It's not. The teacher has your kid for a certain amount of time, but they also have 20 to 30 other kids, and they're responsible for making sure all of those kids learn. But you as their parent are responsible for making sure your child learns, making sure your child understands. It's important for kids to progress socially and educationally as they should, so that way they don't feel like they're failing. And when you have a child that's left behind a year or 2 years, they start to feel left out. They'll stop playing with their friends from the neighborhood because they don't have anything in common anymore, because they're in 2 different aspects of schooling. And then they'll start not really playing with the kids that they're in class with, because again, they're at 2 different stages of growth. So it's important to make sure that they progress. And even if your kid tells you, no, I don't want to go, you still make them go. You make them learn like they're supposed to.
As a parent, that's one thing I'm very proud to say that as far as our children, our son being 4, he's never missed a day of school. With our daughter being 14, going into the ninth grade here, at least at the time of this recording, she only missed one day of school. And she was very violently ill during that particular day, in which I was even comfortable enough to say, yeah, we're definitely not going to school today, not just because we don't want to get anyone else sick, but because of I just want you to get some rest. And I'm always very proud as a parent to see her make high honor roll and be in a position now going into the ninth grade in which she's going to be taking college courses in the 10th grade. That's why it's very important for us as parents to communicate with our children to see what's going on because of what may or may not be happening in their life. We could either purposely or perhaps even unintentionally exposing our child or children into a traumatogenic environment. This will conclude this episode of the Dr. and Mrs. Curry podcast. Mrs. Curry and I genuinely hope that you found the information informative and that either you or someone you know could benefit from this platform. If so, think about liking and sharing this video. If you have not already done so, consider subscribing to our YouTube channel, which is Dr. Joshua John Curry, ED.D, and hit that notification bell so you could be notified when videos and presentations have been uploaded. In addition to our parenting related podcasts, there's a chemical dependency related relapse prevention podcast and multi-systemic presentations that our organization put together and upload to YouTube. Whenever you have time, visit our website, which is www.drcurryandassociates.com, which will connect you to our company, Dr. Curry and Associates. Look into viewing and following us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is at Dr. Joshua Curry. Thank you for taking part in this episode, and Mrs. Curry and I will catch you the next time around.